February 14, 2018. Palm Jumeirah, Dubai. Valentine's Day was supposed to be the happiest day of Hala Al-Shami's life. Instead, it became the day she stopped breathing. The estate manager found her at 11:54 p.m., suspended in the walk-in closet of the bridal suite, her custom Elie Saab wedding gown, hand-beaded with 10,000 Swarovski crystals, transformed into an instrument of death. The silk train, worth more than most people earn in a year, had been fashioned into a noose. Her hazel eyes, which had sparkled during the ceremony just hours earlier, now stared at nothing. The diamond tennis bracelet Fahad had given her that morning still caught the light, a cruel reminder of promises that would never be kept. What the CCTV cameras captured in the 47 minutes before her death would shatter one of Kuwait's wealthiest families and expose a truth darker than the luxury surrounding it could ever conceal. Tonight, we uncover the twisted game of obsession, betrayal, and family secrets that led a brilliant young woman to her final, desperate moments. Welcome to Crime V, where luxury meets tragedy, and the truth hides behind closed doors. 18 months earlier, August 2017. Business Bay, Dubai. Hala Al-Shami was 26 years old when her life collided with the Al-Mansour family, though she wouldn't understand the true cost of that collision until it was far too late. She lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Jumeirah Lake Towers, the kind of place where ambitious young professionals stacked their dreams in climate-controlled boxes while building careers in the city of gold. Her walls were covered with fabric swatches, color palettes, and architectural sketches, evidence of a mind constantly creating, constantly designing spaces where other people could feel at home. Hala's story began long before Dubai, in the ancient streets of Damascus where her father had once been a respected architect. The Syrian civil war had stripped the Al-Shami family of everything except their education and their dignity. They'd arrived in Dubai in 2012 with refugee documentation and determination, rebuilding from absolute zero. Hala's father, Ahmad, now ran a modest construction materials business in Al-Quaz, supplying the very buildings he once would have designed. Her mother, Rania, worked as a seamstress for a local tailoring shop in Dera. Her skilled fingers that had once created elaborate wedding dresses in Damascus now hemming pants for tourists and expatriates. They'd sacrificed everything so Hala and her younger sister Sarah could attend university, could have futures, could become the women they deserved to be. The family lived in a small 3-bedroom apartment in International City, the kind of neighborhood where immigrants from dozens of nations created pockets of home in a city that belonged to everyone and no one. Ahmad would wake at 5 a.m. for morning prayers, then drive to his warehouse where he'd personally oversee shipments and orders, determined that every transaction reflected the integrity he'd once poured into architectural plans. Rania would return home after her shift with fabric scraps she'd been allowed to keep, staying up past midnight sewing traditional Syrian dresses that she'd sell at weekend markets to supplement their income. They never complained. They'd survived bombardments in Damascus, months in refugee camps in Turkey, the bureaucratic nightmare of resettlement. Building a new life from nothing felt almost easy in comparison. Hala had graduated top of her class from the American University in Dubai with a degree in interior design in 2015. By 2017, she was a rising star at Lux Interiors, one of Dubai's premier design firms catering exclusively to the Emirates' wealthiest residents. The journey from refugee daughter to designer for billionaires was something her parents still couldn't quite believe. Ahmad would sometimes drive past buildings Hala had worked on, parking across the street just to stare at the gleaming towers, pride and disbelief warring in his chest. His daughter designing palaces for sheiks and businessmen whose wealth exceeded the GDP of small nations. Hala spoke 4 languages fluently: Arabic, English, French, and Turkish, each one acquired out of necessity during their displacement journey. She possessed that rare quality of making everyone feel seen, heard, understood. Clients trusted her with their most intimate spaces because she held their secrets like sacred trusts. A wife's desire for a private study where her husband couldn't find her. A teenage daughter's need for a space that didn't reflect her parents' taste. A businessman's request for a hidden room that didn't appear on official floor plans. Hala designed spaces that honored what people said and what they didn't say, understanding that luxury wasn't about price tags but about having space to be authentically yourself. She volunteered at refugee community centers in Al-Mahazna on weekends, teaching Syrian children art classes, reminding them that beauty could still exist after destruction. She'd bring supplies purchased with her own money. Good quality paper, proper colored pencils, watercolors that didn't streak or fade. The children would create drawings of homes they remembered, families they'd lost, futures they still dared to imagine. Hala would pin every single drawing on the community center walls, creating galleries that said, "Your story matters, your memory matters, your dreams matter." Her colleagues at Lux Interiors described her as warm but professional, ambitious but grounded, beautiful but modest. She wore her dark hair in a simple style, often pulled back in a low bun that emphasized her high cheekbones and the intensity of her hazel eyes. Eyes that held a kind of old wisdom that came from surviving displacement. Her smile was quiet but genuine, the kind that put nervous clients at ease when they were spending millions on renovations and needed someone to understand their vision. Hala didn't just design rooms. She designed sanctuaries, spaces where people could breathe, could be themselves, could feel safe. Perhaps that's why she was so good at it. She knew what it felt like to desperately need a place of safety. What she wanted from life wasn't complicated. Not wealth, though she'd grown accustomed to moving through wealthy circles with the kind of ease that made people forget she'd arrived in Dubai with nothing. Not fame, though her portfolio was becoming increasingly prestigious and her name was starting to circulate among the Emirates' elite. What Hala wanted was belonging. A place where she didn't have to apologize for her accent, which still carried traces of Damascus in certain words. A place where her background wasn't whispered about at parties. A place where she could build a life that honored her parents' sacrifices while creating something entirely her own. She dreamed of opening her own design firm someday, perhaps one that specifically served the Arab diaspora community, helping displaced families create homes that felt like home. She imagined a practice that understood the specific grief of recreating traditional Syrian courtyards in modern Dubai apartments, of trying to make sterile new construction feel like centuries-old family homes left behind. She wanted to help people carry their heritage forward while building new futures. It was an ambitious dream, but Hala had learned that ambitious dreams were the only kind worth having. In October 2017, Lux Interiors assigned her a project that would change the trajectory of her entire life. High-net-worth client needed his Knightsbridge penthouse redesigned. The client was Kuwaiti, extremely private about his personal life, and willing to pay premium rates for absolute discretion and excellence. The project would require multiple trips to London for consultations and oversight. For a young designer still building her reputation, this was the kind of opportunity that could define a career. Landing a project with a Gulf billionaire meant opening doors to their entire social circle, cousins in Qatar, business partners in Bahrain, friends in Kuwait. One satisfied client from old money could generate a decade of work. The client's name was Rashed Al-Mansour. The Al-Mansour family represented old money in the truest sense, oil wealth that stretched back 3 generations, carefully invested and multiplied across real estate, technology, and private equity throughout the Gulf Cooperation Council. The family's net worth, according to Forbes Middle East's 2017 list, exceeded $4 billion. They owned commercial properties in London, residential towers in Dubai, a controlling stake in Kuwait's third-largest telecommunications company, and investment portfolios that touched everything from renewable energy startups to traditional shipping conglomerates. They moved in circles where business deals were discussed over private jet flights and political connections were maintained through strategic marriages and charitable foundations that bore the family name on hospital wings and university buildings. The patriarch, Abdul Rahman Al-Mansour, 64 years old in 2017, ran the empire with an iron fist and an obsessive concern for the family's public image. He'd inherited a substantial fortune from his father and tripled it through calculated risk-taking in the 1990s and early 2000s. Now, in the twilight of his career, he focused on legacy, ensuring the Al-Mansour name meant something beyond money. It needed to mean integrity, respectability, the kind of old-world honor that commanded respect in majlises and boardrooms alike. His wife, Sheikha Noura, came from a prominent Saudi family, and carried herself with the cold elegance of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world's upper echelons. She managed the family's charitable foundation and social calendar with the same ruthless efficiency her husband brought to business, understanding that in their world, perception was everything. They had 2 sons, and those sons could not have been more different. Rashed Al-Mansour, the eldest at 31, should have been the heir apparent. Tall, charismatic, educated at Oxford where he'd read philosophy, politics, and economics, then Harvard Business School where he'd graduated in the top 10% of his class. He possessed the kind of devastating charm that made people overlook his darker qualities until it was far too late. He could discuss Nietzsche and quarterly earnings reports with equal fluency. He collected contemporary art with an educated eye, owned vintage sports cars he actually knew how to maintain, and wore custom suits that fit perfectly because he understood tailoring. At parties, he was magnetic, telling stories that made people laugh, remembering names and personal details, making everyone feel like the most interesting person in the room. But Rashed had a problem that all his family's wealth and all his education couldn't fix. He was volatile, explosive, dangerous when he didn't get what he wanted. The charm was a mask, and beneath it was something broken that no amount of therapy or medication or family intervention had managed to repair. He collected beautiful things, contemporary art, vintage sports cars, designer watches, and he collected beautiful women with the same casual acquisitiveness. And when those beautiful things disappointed him, when they revealed themselves to be less than perfect, his rage was biblical. The scandals had accumulated like storm clouds. In 2016, a British model named Victoria Hollis had filed assault allegations against him after a weekend in Monaco that had started with champagne on a yacht and ended with her locked in a hotel bathroom, calling for help. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed 7-figure sum and a non-disclosure agreement so airtight that even mentioning it could trigger lawsuits. In early 2017, a DUI incident in Dubai had been quietly disappeared by family lawyers, but not before phone camera footage of Rashed screaming at police officers, threatening them with consequences they couldn't imagine, invoking his family name like a weapon, circulated briefly on social media before being scrubbed through a combination of legal pressure and strategic payments to platform moderators. Then came the incident that finally broke his father's patience. A fight at Cavalli Club, one of Dubai's most exclusive night spots, in June 2017. Multiple phone cameras captured Rashed throwing punches at another patron, a Lebanese businessman who'd made an offhand comment about Kuwaiti families buying their way into respectability. Rashed had vaulted over a table, connected 3 solid punches before security could separate them, and screamed threats that included graphic descriptions of what his family would do to the man's business interests. The video went viral before it could be contained, and for 48 hours, the Al-Mansour name was associated with exactly the kind of behavior Abdul Rahman had spent decades trying to distance the family from. Abdul Rahman's decision was swift and brutal: exile. Rashed was removed from all board positions in Al-Mansour Holdings, stripped of his responsibilities in the family's charitable foundation, given a generous trust fund that would maintain his lifestyle indefinitely, and sent to London with clear instructions: stay away until you learn to behave like an Al-Mansour, or don't come back at all. Fix yourself. Prove you can control yourself. And don't embarrass us again. Which left Fahad. Fahad Al-Mansour, 26 years old, had spent his entire life in his older brother's shadow, and now that shadow had been forcibly removed, leaving Fahad standing in sunlight he'd never asked for. Where Rashed was volatile, Fahad was controlled, almost rigidly so. Where Rashed collected scandals like other people collected stamps, Fahad collected commendations. Employee of the quarter at Al-Mansour Holdings 3 times in 2 years, volunteer coordinator for the Family Foundation's education initiatives, dutiful son who attended every family dinner and followed every expectation with exhausting consistency, Stanford Business School graduate with honors, thesis on ethical investment strategies in emerging markets, actively involved in the family's charitable foundations, personally overseeing a scholarship program for underprivileged students from GCC countries. He wore traditional kandoras more often than Western suits, preferring the white robes and black agal that signaled cultural rootedness and respect for tradition. He prayed 5 times daily without fail, kept Ramadan with genuine spiritual commitment rather than cultural performance, and genuinely seemed to care about using his family's wealth for good. He was everything Rashed wasn't: respectful, stable, predictable, boring. But that boring dependability was exactly what Abdul Rahman needed. With Rashed exiled and the family name damaged, Fahad became the future of Al-Mansour Holdings and everything it represented. The pressure on him was immense and unrelenting. Marry the right woman. Someone respectable, educated, preferably from a good family but not so prominent that she'd overshadow the Al-Mansour name. Produce heirs, preferably sons, preferably multiple. Restore family honor through flawless behavior and strategic philanthropy. Prove that the Al-Mansour name still meant something beyond scandal and damage control. Show Kuwait and the broader GCC that this family could still be trusted with influence and power. Fahad carried that burden with grace, but those who knew him well could see the weight of it in his eyes. His mother would catch him sometimes, staring out windows with an expression that suggested he was calculating distances, measuring the gap between who he was and who he was expected to be. Every success felt like a reminder of his brother's failures. Every achievement felt like it came with an asterisk. The good son, the backup plan, the one who succeeded only because his brother had failed spectacularly and publicly. The brothers barely communicated anymore. Occasional texts on birthdays, stilted phone calls during Ramadan where they'd exchange pleasantries and avoid anything substantial. Rashed resented Fahad for taking what should have been his, the board position, the father's approval, the future itself. Fahad felt guilt mixed with relief that his brother's absence meant he could finally step into his own life without constant comparison. But the relief was always tinged with sadness. They'd been close once when they were children. Rashed had taught Fahad to swim in the family's pool, had defended him from bullies at their private school, had been the kind of big brother who felt like protection personified. That version of Rashed seemed like a different person now, someone who'd been gradually replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Neither of them understood yet that their fractured brotherhood would destroy an innocent woman caught between them. October 2017. Knightsbridge, London. The penthouse where everything began. The apartment occupied the entire top floor of a historic building overlooking Hyde Park, and walking into it felt like stepping into controlled perfection. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed London like a museum painting, contemporary art worth millions hung on walls with carefully calculated casualness. A Damien Hirst butterfly piece in the living room. A Tracy Emin neon in the hallway. Smaller works by emerging artists whose names Hala didn't recognize, but whose talent was immediately apparent. Every piece of furniture whispered quiet wealth. This wasn't the kind of space that screamed money. It was the kind that assumed you already knew. Rashed Al-Mansour stood at those windows when Hala arrived for their first consultation. His silhouette framed against the autumn gray of London's perpetually overcast sky. When he turned, his smile was devastating. Not friendly exactly, but magnetic in the way that dangerous things often are. He was handsome in that effortless way that came from excellent genetics and expensive grooming. Strong jawline, dark eyes that held intelligence and intensity in equal measure, hair styled in a way that looked casual but definitely wasn't. He wore clothes that probably cost more than Hala's monthly rent but looked relaxed. Cashmere sweater, well-fitted jeans, Italian leather loafers worn without socks. Their first meeting was professional. Hala maintained her boundaries carefully, showing him concept boards and discussing his preferences for the space. Rashed wanted something modern but warm, minimalist but lived in, a contradiction that would challenge any designer. Most men his age with his resources would have just pointed at pictures in magazines and said, "Make it look expensive." But Rashed was different. He was knowledgeable about architecture and design history, which surprised her. Most of her wealthy clients had opinions but little actual expertise. Rashed could discuss the Bauhaus movement and contemporary Emirati architecture with equal fluency. He'd clearly spent time thinking about space, about how environments shape psychology and behavior. The project should have taken 6 weeks of consultation and 3 months of implementation. Instead, Rashed extended the timeline indefinitely. Additional rooms needed reconsidering. Material choices required multiple in-person reviews. Did she think the kitchen should be Calcutta marble or statuario? Could she source that specific shade of gray he'd seen in a Berlin gallery 3 years ago? He began appearing at the fabric suppliers Hala frequented in London, claiming coincidence when they'd run into each other at Chelsea Harbour Design Centre or Designers Guild on King's Road. When she returned to Dubai between site visits, he happened to be there too, at the same restaurants in DIFC, the same galleries in Al Circle Avenue, the same carefully curated spaces where the city's elite crossed paths. Hala wasn't naive. She recognized attraction when she saw it, and she recognized pursuit. She'd been hit on by clients before. Wealthy men seemed to think hiring her meant she came with the furniture package. But she also recognized opportunity. Rashed Al-Mansour was connected to every wealthy family in the GCC. His recommendation could make her career. One satisfied Al-Mansour could generate referrals to cousins in Qatar, business partners in Bahrain, family friends in Kuwait. So she remained professional, polite, carefully distant. She never had coffee alone with him, never accepted dinner invitations, never crossed the line between designer and client. When he suggested meeting outside business hours, she'd smile and redirect to her office schedule. But Rashed was patient. And patient predators are always the most dangerous because they understand that the best prey walks willingly into the trap. The shift happened on a December evening during her final scheduled site visit before the holiday break. The redesign was nearly complete, elegant, sophisticated, exactly what Rashed had claimed to want. His cold, perfect penthouse now had warmth, texture, the kind of space that looked like someone actually lived there rather than just displayed wealth. They were doing a final walkthrough, Hala taking notes on the last few items that needed attention, when Rashed opened a bottle of 1990 Chateau Margaux, wine that cost more than Hala had spent on her entire university education. Just to celebrate the completion, he said. Professional courtesy. The job was done and done beautifully. One glass became two. Two became a conversation that stretched past midnight. The wine made everything softer, easier, more honest than conversations should be between client and designer. Rashed talked about exile, about disappointing his father, about feeling like a perpetual failure no matter what he achieved. He spoke about the pressure of being the eldest son in a family where image was everything, about making one too many mistakes and being discarded like a broken possession. His vulnerability felt real, raw, human in a way that contradicted everything Hala had assumed about spoiled wealthy heirs who threw tantrums in nightclubs. She understood exile in ways that Rashed could never fully comprehend. She understood disappointing families, not belonging, carrying the weight of others' expectations. Her displacement was different from his. Hers had been forced by war and survival, his by consequence and punishment, but the emotional landscape felt familiar. The isolation, the sense of being disconnected from the life you were supposed to have. The way people looked at you differently once you were marked as someone who didn't belong in the spaces you occupied. When Rashed kissed her that night, Hala knew it was dangerous. But danger sometimes wears the face of wounded vulnerability, and lonely people sometimes make choices they know they shouldn't because the alternative is staying lonely. The affair began that December and continued through April 2018. Secret meetings in London during Hala's work trips. Her firm was understanding about the extended timelines because the Al-Mansour account was lucrative enough to justify flexibility. Luxury hotels where they could pretend to be normal people having a normal relationship, where Rashed didn't have to be the exiled son and Hala didn't have to be the refugee designer. The Connaught, Claridge's, the Beaumont, places where discretion was purchased along with Egyptian cotton sheets and 24-hour room service. Michelin star restaurants where they'd talk for hours. Private boxes at West End theaters. Weekend trips to the Cotswolds where they'd stay in converted manor houses and pretend to be English gentry for 48 hours. Rashed on his best behavior was intoxicating. Attentive, generous, intellectually stimulating in ways Hala hadn't experienced before. He'd recommend books and actually discuss them in depth. He'd take her to gallery openings and know the artists' histories. He promised that once he proved himself to his father again, once he demonstrated he could control himself and rebuild his reputation, they could go public. Once he was back in the family's good graces, she would never have to hide again. They could get married properly, with family approval and public celebration. He painted pictures of a future where she'd be Mrs. Rashed Al-Mansour, where her parents would never worry about money again, where her sister could attend any university in the world. Hala let herself hope. Maybe she could be the woman who saved him, who loved him back to wholeness, who proved that he was more than his worst moments. She'd seen his gentle side, his intelligence, his genuine affection. The volatile man from the scandal reports felt like someone else, something exaggerated by media and family drama. Everyone deserved a second chance, didn't they? Everyone deserved to be loved despite their flaws. Then she saw the other Rashed. Started small. Mood swings that appeared without warning, like weather systems that materialized from clear skies. Jealousy over male clients she mentioned casually in conversation. Demands for constant availability that felt less like affection and more like surveillance. Where are you? Who are you with? Why didn't you answer your phone immediately? The questions came rapid fire, each one carrying an undertone that suggested the wrong answer would have consequences. The first serious incident happened in February 2018, 3 months into their relationship. Hala didn't answer her phone immediately during a client meeting in Dubai. She'd silenced it completely because presenting design proposals required focus and professionalism. When she called Rashed back an hour later, he'd worked himself into barely controlled rage. How dare she ignore him? Who was more important than him? Was she with someone else? The accusations came in a torrent, each one more irrational than the last, building to a crescendo where Rashed's voice took on a quality she'd never heard before. Something cold and cruel and absolutely convinced of betrayal. The designer handbag he'd given her 2 weeks earlier, Hermes Birkin, worth £15,000, in that perfect shade of caramel she'd admired, flew across his apartment and shattered a glass sculpture worth probably double that. Hala stared at the wreckage, her hands shaking, seeing clearly for the first time what she'd been refusing to see. The wreckage wasn't just broken glass and damaged leather. It was a preview of what happened to beautiful things in Rashed's life when they disappointed him. The second incident, 3 weeks later in early March, left bruises that Hala would have to cover with long sleeves for a week. They were arguing about her needing space, needing time to think about where their relationship was going, whether this was healthy, whether his jealousy was something that could be managed or was a fundamental flaw that would only worsen. Rashed's grip on her wrist was hard enough to leave finger-shaped marks, his face inches from hers, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more frightening than shouting had ever been. "Nobody leaves me," he said, each word enunciated with terrifying precision. Nobody. Hala made her decision that night. This wasn't love. This was possession. This was exactly the pattern she'd read about in psychology articles about abusive relationships. Initial charm, gradual isolation, explosive anger, tearful apologies. Repeat. The cycle was textbook, and she'd been so focused on saving him that she'd nearly destroyed herself in the process. She thought about her mother, about the strength it had taken to leave Damascus with 2 young daughters and start over. She thought about everything her parents had sacrificed so she could have choices, could have agency, could build a life where she didn't have to accept mistreatment. She owed it to them and to herself to walk away while she still could. Breaking up with Rashed Al-Mansour required strategy. She insisted on a public place. The Connaught Hotel in Mayfair, private dining room but with hotel security visible through the glass walls. She arrived early, positioned herself with clear sightlines to exits, kept her phone in her hand with emergency services already dialed, 1 button away from calling. Rashed was calm when she told him it was over, frighteningly calm. His voice never rose above conversational volume, but his words cut like surgical instruments designed to find exactly where you were most vulnerable and apply maximum pressure. "You're making a mistake, Hala. A serious mistake. Nobody leaves me. Nobody. You think you can just walk away after everything I've given you? Those client connections, those opportunities, that reputation you're building, I gave you all of that. Without me, you're just another Syrian designer in a city full of them. You're a refugee playing dress-up in rich people's houses. I made you, and you're going to throw that away." Hala kept her voice steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Then I'll be just another designer. But I'll be free. And that's worth more than anything you've given me." The final threat came as a whisper as she stood to leave, her legs shaking but her resolve absolute. Rashed leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne. Creed Aventus, the same scent that used to make her feel safe and now made her feel trapped. "You know what my family does to people who betray us, Hala? We destroy them. Completely. You'll regret this. She walked out with hotel security escorting her to her car at her request, her entire body shaking, knowing she dodged something terrible, but not understanding yet that terrible things don't let you dodge them forever. They just wait. She blocked his number immediately, changed her work email address, declined any projects that might connect to the Al-Mansour family or their extended business network. She threw herself into work with manic intensity, accepting multiple projects simultaneously, working 16-hour days, trying to exhaust herself so thoroughly that she couldn't think about Rashed or what he'd said or what he might do. That should have been the end. In any rational story, that would have been the end. A relationship that didn't work out, a clean break, two people moving on with their lives. But Hala Al-Shami had no idea that walking away from Rashed was only the beginning. She didn't know that in 2 months, she would meet his brother at a charity gala and feel her heart stop when she heard the family name. She didn't know that keeping her silence about Rashed would become the decision that killed her. And she didn't know that Rashed Al-Mansour was not the kind of man who forgot or forgave, and that his capacity for revenge would prove far more sophisticated than his capacity for love had ever been. June 2017. Emirates Hills, Dubai. A charity gala that would seal Hala's fate. The event was organized by Dubai Cares Foundation, focused specifically on Syrian refugee education, providing scholarships, school supplies, and educational infrastructure for displaced children across the Middle East. It was exactly the kind of cause that brought together Dubai's elite with their checkbooks and their carefully cultivated concern for humanitarian issues. The venue was a private estate in Emirates Hills, one of those mansions that looked like it had been airlifted directly from a Mediterranean coast and dropped into the desert with unlimited budget and unlimited ambition. Hala attended as a representative of Lux Interiors, which had donated the event design services, elaborate floral arrangements, strategic lighting that made everything look like a photograph, carefully curated spaces that encouraged wealthy guests to linger and write larger checks. She wore a simple black dress, professional but elegant, her hair pulled back in a style that suggested competence rather than trying to compete with the designer gowns surrounding her. She was there to work, to network appropriately, to represent her firm with the kind of quiet professionalism that made clients remember you positively. She was talking with Layla Ibrahim, a prominent Emirati philanthropist who served on multiple charity boards and whose recommendation could open countless doors, when Layla gestured to someone across the garden. "Hala, I want you to meet someone. He's been asking about the design work." Very impressed with the setup. The man approaching was younger than most of the guests, perhaps late 20s, wearing a traditional white kandora and black agal with the kind of ease that suggested genuine comfort rather than costume. He had a warm smile, softer features than most Khaliji men she'd met, an approachable quality that immediately put her at ease. And then Layla said the words that made Hala's blood turn to ice. "Hala, this is Fahad Al-Mansour." "Fahad, this is Hala Al-Shami, the brilliant designer behind tonight's beautiful setup." Al-Mansour. The name hit her like a physical blow. Her vision tunneled briefly, sound becoming distant and muffled. She felt the color drain from her face, felt her hands go cold despite the warm Dubai evening. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. Dubai had millions of people, thousands of wealthy families. What were the odds? Fahad noticed immediately. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Hala forced herself to breathe, to smile, to function. "I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else for a moment." The resemblance was startling. It wasn't entirely a lie. There were similarities in the bone structure, the height, something about the eyes. But where Rashed's features carried intensity that bordered on aggression, Fahad's carried kindness. Different expressions on a similar canvas. They talked for 40 minutes, and Hala found herself genuinely engaged despite her internal panic. Fahad was nothing like Rashed. Where his brother had been magnetic but dangerous, Fahad was steady and genuine. He discussed the Al-Mansour Foundation's work supporting displaced families with real knowledge and obvious passion, not the performative concern that characterized most wealthy people's relationship with charity. He asked about her experience as a refugee, but in a way that suggested genuine curiosity rather than voyeuristic interest in trauma. He wanted to know about Syrian architecture and what had been lost, about the specific challenges of rebuilding identity in diaspora, about how design could help displaced people create homes that honored their past while building new futures. My family's foundation focuses heavily on education, Fahad explained, but I've been thinking we should expand into housing initiatives, not just emergency shelter, but actual homes, spaces where families can heal, can rebuild. Would you be willing to consult on something like that? Hala's mind was racing through calculations. Fahad clearly didn't know about her and Rashed. Why would he? The brothers barely communicated, and Rashed had always insisted on absolute discretion. She'd never been to any Al-Mansour family properties, never met any of his relatives. Their entire relationship had existed in the bubble of London hotels and private restaurants. And Rashed was still in exile in London, thousands of miles away, presumably living his own life with new women and new dramas. This could be completely separate. Fahad was offering professional opportunities that could genuinely help refugee communities. The foundation's resources were substantial. She could do real good with that kind of backing. And what were the chances Rashed would even find out? He was exiled, persona non grata in his own family. He probably wouldn't even hear about Fahad's charitable initiatives. I'd be honored to help however I can, Hala heard herself say, making a choice that would ultimately kill her. Over the next 3 months, professional collaboration became something more. Fahad was everything Rashed had pretended to be. Genuinely kind, genuinely interested in making the world better, genuinely respectful of boundaries and commitments. Their meetings about foundation initiatives stretched into dinners with Hala's parents present, following traditional courtship protocols. Fahad visited the Al-Shami family home in International City with flowers for Rania and architectural books for Ahmad. Sitting on their modest furniture and eating Rania's stuffed grape leaves with genuine appreciation rather than the condescension wealthy people often brought to immigrant spaces. Ahmad and Rania were cautiously thrilled. A good man from a wealthy family who treated their daughter with respect, who saw her education and talent rather than just her refugee status, who came to their home rather than demanding they come to his. He has good character, Ahmad said after Fahad's third visit. Money doesn't impress me, but character does. This boy has been raised properly. The Al-Mansour family's assessment of Hala was more calculating but ultimately positive. Sheikha Noura conducted what amounted to a background investigation. Discreet inquiries into Hala's reputation, her work, her family. Syrian but educated. Designer but successful. Refugee background, but she's made something of herself. No scandals we can find, no concerning associations. And Fahad seems genuinely happy, which is rare enough in these arrangements. Abdul Rahman's approval came in the form of a gruff nod. Better a self-made woman than another spoiled princess. At least she understands the value of work. And she knows how to be discreet, which this family needs after. He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew he meant Rashed. The engagement happened in September 2017, just 5 months after that first meeting. Fahad proposed at Burj Al Arab during a private dinner, a 5-carat Tiffany diamond that caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Arabian Gulf. Hala, you make me believe in building something good, in using what we have to help others, in being better than what I was born into. Will you marry me? She said yes because she meant it. Fahad was good. This was real. Whatever had happened with Rashed was in the past, locked away in London, irrelevant to this new chapter. She convinced herself that some secrets were acts of kindness. Telling Fahad about Rashed would only hurt him, would poison something beautiful with something that no longer mattered. But secrets in wealthy families have a way of surfacing, especially when someone wants them to. The wedding planning consumed 4 months. $12 million, 800 guests. A private mansion on Palm Jumeirah rented and completely redesigned for the occasion. Hala's input was welcomed but ultimately secondary to Sheikha Noura's vision of what an Al-Mansour wedding should communicate to Kuwaiti society and the broader Gulf elite. This wasn't just a marriage. It was a statement that the family had moved past scandal, had restored its honor, had produced a son worthy of respect and a bride worthy of the family name. Throughout the planning, Hala asked carefully casual questions about Rashed. Where was he? Would he attend? Fahad's answers were consistent. Still in London. Father's slowly bringing him back into peripheral business matters, but he's not ready to return to Dubai yet. He won't be at the wedding. Still restricted from the UAE. Each answer brought Hala relief. She could get through this. She could marry Fahad, build a good life, help refugee families through the foundation, honor her parents' sacrifices. Rashed was a closed chapter, a mistake she'd learned from, something that belonged to a different version of herself. Then, at 11:47 p.m. on February 13, 2018, the night before her wedding, her phone rang with a UK number. She almost didn't answer. She was in her apartment, surrounded by her sisters and cousins who'd flown in from Syria and Turkey for the wedding, listening to traditional music and getting henna applied in the ancient pre-wedding ritual. But something made her step onto the balcony, away from the celebration, and answer. "Hello, Hala." Rashed's voice, smooth and dangerous. "Did you really think I'd miss your big day?" Her blood turned to ice. "Rashed, please. It's over." "You said." "I never said it was over." "You did. But I've decided to forgive you. I'm coming to the wedding. Surprise. Tomorrow you're marrying my baby brother. The one who got everything I should have had. Isn't that romantic? We'll all be family." "You can't. Fahad said you weren't coming." "You're not allowed. Plans change. Father decided it was time for family reconciliation. And I wouldn't miss seeing you in a wedding dress, Habibti. We have so much to catch up on. So many stories to share." The line went dead. Hala stood on her balcony in her pajamas, henna drying on her hands, staring at Dubai's glittering skyline, and felt her future collapse. She should cancel the wedding. She should tell Fahad everything right now. She should run. But 800 guests had already traveled to Dubai. Her parents had already spent the settlement money on extended family arrangements. Sheikh Noura had already made this wedding a symbol of family restoration. The mansion was decorated. The dress was ready. Canceling now would destroy everyone. Her family's honor, Fahad's reputation, her own future. Maybe Rashed was bluffing. Maybe he just wanted to unsettle her. Maybe she could avoid him at the wedding, get through the ceremony, deal with the aftermath later. Surely he wouldn't make a scene at his own brother's wedding with 800 witnesses. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat on her balcony watching the sun rise over Dubai, knowing that in 18 hours, she'd be married, and knowing, with absolute certainty, that Rashed Al-Mansour would find a way to destroy her. February 14, 2018. The wedding day began like a fairy tale and ended like a nightmare. Hala's apartment filled with women at 6 a.m. Her mother, sister, aunts, cousins, and a professional hair and makeup team that arrived with cases of products and tools that looked more like surgical instruments than beauty supplies. The Elie Saab dress hung in the corner like a ghost, its 10,000 Swarovski crystals catching the morning light and throwing rainbows across the walls. Custom-made, 5 fittings, $250,000 of silk and beading and couture craftsmanship. It was the kind of dress that should have made a bride feel like a princess. Hala felt like she was preparing for her own funeral. "You look pale, Habibti," Rania said, pressing a hand to her daughter's forehead. "Are you feeling sick? Should we call a doctor?" "Just nervous, Mama. Every bride is nervous." But this wasn't normal wedding anxiety. This was the visceral fear of a prey animal that knows the predator is close. Every time her phone buzzed, Hala's heart rate spiked. Every unknown number sent adrenaline flooding through her system. She kept waiting for Rashed to call again, to make another threat, to tell her exactly how he planned to destroy everything. The silence was almost worse than the threats. At the Al-Mansour family estate in Emirates Hills, Fahad was going through his own preparations. Traditional kandora, gold-trimmed bisht, the formal attire of a Khaliji groom. His father stood in the doorway of his room, watching with an expression that mixed pride with the weight of expectation. "Today, you become the future of this family," Abdul Rahman said. "Everything you do reflects on us. Everything you represent carries the Al-Mansour name forward. Your brother disgraced us. You will redeem us." Fahad nodded, feeling the familiar pressure settle onto his shoulders like a physical weight. He was 26 years old and already tired of being the good son, the redemption arc, the one who had to be perfect because his brother had been so spectacularly imperfect. I won't disappoint you, father. See that you don't. At Dubai International Airport's private aviation terminal, a Bombardier Global 7500 touched down at 11:23 a.m. The passenger manifest listed a single name, Rashed Al-Mansour. Immigration waved him through with VIP courtesy. The Al-Mansour name still carried weight, still opened doors, still commanded deference even for the exiled son. Rashed emerged into Dubai's February sunshine wearing a dark designer suit, Persol sunglasses, and a smile that would have looked charming to anyone who didn't know what it meant. His driver waited with a black Mercedes S-Class, engine running. Welcome back to Dubai, sir. Where to? The wedding. Where else? The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Palm Jumeirah mansion, with cocktail reception to follow at 4 p.m. and dinner beginning at 7 p.m. The venue had been transformed into something from Arabian Nights, white roses and orchids covering every surface, crystal installations hanging from the ceiling catching light and throwing prismatic patterns across white marble floors, tables set with gold chargers and custom linens. $3 million in flowers alone. The kind of wedding that would be featured in luxury magazines and discussed in Kuwaiti majlises for months. Security was extensive, former military personnel managing guest lists, metal detectors disguised as decorative arches, 24 CCTV cameras covering every angle of the property. Every entrance, every hallway, every corridor captured in high-definition video. The only spaces without cameras were the private family suites on the 3rd floor, excluded at Sheikha Noura's insistence because even security should not invade family privacy. That decision would prove crucial. Guests began arriving at 1:30 p.m. Emirati royalty, Kuwaiti business leaders, Saudi diplomats, the entire ecosystem of Gulf elite society dressed in their finest traditional attire and designer gowns. The men gathered in one section, the women in another, following traditional segregation protocols that would relax later in the evening. Everyone who was anyone in GCC social circles was present, and everyone understood they were witnessing not just a wedding but a statement. The Al-Mansour family was back. At 2:47 p.m., Hala made her entrance on her father's arm. The dress caught every light in the room, making her look like she was wrapped in starlight. Her face was covered by the traditional veil, but those close enough could see her eyes wide, scanning the crowd with barely concealed panic. She was looking for Rashed, searching every face, waiting for him to appear and destroy everything. Ahmad walked slowly, savoring every step. His daughter, marrying into one of Kuwait's wealthiest families. His daughter, who'd been a child in a refugee camp 6 years ago, now walking toward a future of security and respect. He didn't notice that Hala's hand on his arm was trembling. Fahad stood at the end of the aisle watching his bride approach, and his expression was pure, unguarded love. He'd waited his whole life to feel this way about someone. Genuine connection, partnership, the sense that he was building something real rather than performing for family expectations. Hala made him feel like more than the good son, more than the redemption arc. She made him feel seen. The traditional Islamic nikah ceremony was conducted by a respected sheikh, witnesses signing documents that made the marriage legal under both Islamic and UAE law. Hala's hand shook as she signed her name, the pen nearly slipping from her fingers. The sheikh declared them married before Allah and the assembled community. Guests applauded. Cameras flashed. Fahad lifted her veil with infinite gentleness and kissed her forehead in the chaste public gesture appropriate for the moment. They were married. It was done. Maybe Rashed had been bluffing after all. Then, at 4:47 p.m., as cocktail hour filled the gardens with champagne-drinking guests and polite conversation, CCTV camera 7 captured a tall man in a designer suit walking through the entrance. Security didn't stop him. They recognized an Al-Mansour family member. His invitation status wasn't questioned because he was family, and family had automatic access. Rashed Al-Mansour had arrived at his brother's wedding. Hala saw him before Fahad did. She was talking with a group of Syrian guests, accepting congratulations and compliments on her dress, when she spotted him across the garden. The glass of sparkling water in her hand fell, shattering on the marble terrace. Crystal exploded across expensive stone. Guests turned, concerned. Hala laughed it off. Nervous bride, how clumsy. But her face had gone white. Rashed caught her eye across 50 feet of manicured garden and social distance. He raised his champagne glass in a mock toast. Then he smiled. Fahad was talking with a group of Kuwaiti businessmen when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see his brother standing there, arms open for an embrace. "Brother, didn't think I'd miss this. Did you?" The hug was captured by dozens of cameras, social photographers, guests' phones, the official wedding videographer. It looked perfect. Two brothers reunited, family healing, the Al-Mansour name restored. Only those paying very close attention would notice the tension in Fahad's shoulders. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "What are you doing here? Father said you weren't coming." Plans changed. Family reconciliation very touching. "I wouldn't miss seeing you marry." Rashed paused, let the moment hang. "Such a beautiful bride. Where is she? I should offer my congratulations." The reception proceeded with Rashed moving through it like a shark through water, appearing in conversations, making toasts that sounded loving but carried undertones only Hala could hear, positioning himself in family photos with the practiced ease of someone who knew exactly how to make his presence unavoidable. And throughout it all, the CCTV cameras recorded everything. 5:03 p.m. Camera 14 captured Hala seeing Rashed across the reception hall, her champagne glass slipping but caught before it fell. 5:47 p.m. Camera 15 showed Rashed approaching Hala in the garden, her trying to move away, him blocking her path. "Lovely ceremony. You make a beautiful bride. Did you tell Fahad about us? About London? About how you cried my name in the Connaught Hotel?" 6:30 p.m. Camera 19 recorded traditional dabka dancing, Rashed joining the men's line directly next to Fahad, leaning close to whisper something that made Fahad's expression change from joy to confusion. What Rashed said: "She's beautiful, brother. Almost as beautiful as she was in my bed." Fahad's response: "What are you talking about?" Rashed: "Ask her about last spring. Ask her about the Knightsbridge project. Ask her why she looks so terrified that I'm here." The seed was planted. 7:15 p.m. Camera 3, corridor near the bathrooms, captured the encounter that would later become crucial evidence. Rashed intercepting Hala, gripping her arm hard enough to leave fingerprints that would be photographed during the autopsy. The footage showed him leaning close, talking, her trying to pull away, his grip tightening. 2 minutes and 34 seconds of conversation with no audio, but Hala's expression told the story clearly enough. Pleading, frightened, trapped. What he said: "You chose the safer brother, the richer future, the better investment. But you're mine, Hala. You'll always be mine. Tonight, in your bridal bed, when Fahad touches you, will you think of me? Will you remember how you begged me not to leave you in London?" What she said: "Please, don't do this. Don't ruin this for him. He's your brother." What he said: "Exactly. He's my brother. And you took from me and gave it to him. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" 8 p.m. The cake-cutting ceremony, captured on camera 12. The official photographer positioned the couple perfectly. Fahad and Hala's hands on the knife, cutting through 5 tiers of vanilla and pistachio, guests applauding. And directly behind them, caught in the frame, Rashed with his hand on Fahad's shoulder, leaning in for more whispered poison. "She never told you, did she? About us. About how she left me and found you. About how she's been lying to you since the day you met." Fahad's composure cracked. The smile became forced, mechanical. Hala noticed her new husband's expression and felt the future collapsing in real time. 8:45 p.m. Camera 21 captured Hala pulling Fahad aside, trying to explain. The footage showed her mouth moving rapidly, hands gesturing, expression desperate. It showed Fahad's face changing from confusion to understanding to betrayal. Her words: "Your brother, Rashed. He's saying things. He's lying. Before I met you, I dated someone, but it was over before." His interruption: "Is it true? Did you know Rashed before me?" Her fatal hesitation: 2 seconds of silence that confirmed everything. His response: "You knew. You knew he was my brother and you never told me. Our entire relationship has been built on a lie." Her attempt to explain: "It was over before I met you. It meant nothing. I was going to tell you, but..." His words: "But you didn't. For 8 months you didn't. Through our engagement, through planning this wedding, through meeting my family, you stayed silent. Why?" No good answer existed. Any answer would have been wrong. 9 p.m. The traditional send-off, captured on camera 1. Rice and rose petals, guests cheering. The new couple leaving for their bridal suite in the mansion's private wing. Picture-perfect conclusion to a perfect wedding. Except Fahad and Hala weren't holding hands. Weren't looking at each other. Were walking side by side like strangers who happened to be moving in the same direction. 9:15 p.m. The bridal suite door closed behind them. Camera 24 in the hallway captured them entering together. Then silence. No cameras inside, as per family request. Privacy for the wedding night. Inside that suite there was no romance. No joy. No consummation. Just Fahad standing at the window in his wedding attire, staring at Palm Jumeirah's lights. And Hala sitting on the edge of their marriage bed, still in her $250,000 dress, mascara starting to run. "How long?" Fahad asked without turning around. 5 months. Last year. October to April. "And when you found out he was my brother?" "At our engagement. When I met your family officially. I didn't know before that. But after you knew, you still didn't tell me." Silence. What defense could she offer? My brother. Of all people. My brother. "I thought it was better not to." "You thought it was better to lie. To build our marriage on deception." "It wasn't like that. It was over. He was in London." "I thought." "You thought wrong." Fahad grabbed his bisht from where he'd laid it on a chair and walked toward the door. "Fahad, please. Don't leave. Not tonight. I need time. To think. To process this. It's our wedding night. Our wedding night was based on a lie. Everything has been based on a lie." The door closed behind him. Soft but final. Camera 24 captured him leaving at 9:47 p.m. Captured him walking toward the guest wing. Captured the defeat in his posture. Camera 24 captured Rashed emerging from his own guest room at 9:52 p.m. Captured him heading directly toward the bridal suite. Captured the purposeful confidence in his stride. At 9:53 p.m., Rashed knocked on the bridal suite door. Hala answered, thinking Fahad had returned. When she saw Rashed instead, she tried to close the door. He blocked it with his foot, entered without invitation, closed the door behind him. The cameras couldn't see inside, but they would capture him leaving 1 hour and 41 minutes later. And 13 minutes after that, they would capture Fahad returning to find his bride hanging in the walk-in closet. The train of her wedding dress fashioned into a noose, her hazel eyes staring at nothing, her diamond bracelet still catching the light. February 15, 2018. 12:27 a.m. Dubai police arrived at the Palm Jumeirah mansion to find chaos contained behind luxury's facade. Lieutenant Khalid Al-Mansour had been a homicide investigator for 15 years, long enough to know that wealthy families and dead brides made for complicated cases, where truth got buried under layers of money and lawyers. He arrived to find estate security sealing the 3rd floor, the Al-Mansour family gathering in a private sitting room, and Fahad sitting on the floor outside the bridal suite covered in his wife's blood from failed CPR attempts. The scene told a simple story on the surface. Hala Al-Shami, bride of 7 hours, found hanging in the walk-in closet. The silk train of her Elie Saab gown fashioned into a noose, tied to the closet rod with desperate, amateurish knots. Her knees were bent. She could have saved herself if she'd wanted to. That detail suggested intentional death rather than accident. No signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. No indication anyone had physically forced her. The preliminary assessment was straightforward. Suicide by hanging. Tragic, shocking, but not criminal. But Lieutenant Al-Mansour had learned to distrust straightforward stories in families where image was currency. Fahad was interviewed first, still in shock, his white kandora stained with makeup and blood. His voice was hollow, mechanical. We had an argument. About her past. About things she hadn't told me. I left to clear my head around 9:47 p.m. When I came back at 11:47, she was hanging there. I cut her down. I tried to save her. But she was already gone. What was the argument about? My brother. She dated my brother before me. She never told me. I found out tonight. Rashed told me. Al-Mansour's instincts sharpened. Your brother was at the wedding? He came back from London. Father arranged it. I didn't know he was coming. Where is your brother now? Guest room. East wing. Rashed was interviewed at 2:15 a.m. with 3 family attorneys present. He was composed, appropriately somber, every response carefully calibrated. I went to check on Hala around 10 p.m. As family, I was concerned. She was upset, crying. I tried to comfort her. I left around 10:30 p.m. She said she needed space. I respected that. And where were you between 10:30 p.m. and when the body was discovered? In my guest room. I went to bed. I traveled from London that morning. Can anyone confirm that? I was alone. How would you describe your relationship with Mrs. Al-Mansour? The slightest pause. We were friendly. I'd met her a few times during the engagement. She seemed nice. You'd never known her before the engagement? No. Why would I? Lieutenant Al-Mansour made notes. Sometimes silence prompted more truth than questions. Forensic examination began at 3 a.m. Technicians photographed everything, collected fingerprints, DNA samples, fibers. The closet showed no struggle. The noose knots were amateurish but effective. Hala's neck showed ligature marks consistent with hanging. No defensive wounds. Time of death estimated between 11:20 p.m. and 11:40 p.m. Everything pointed to suicide. But Hala's phone told a different story. By 5 a.m., digital forensics had accessed everything. Text messages to her sister Sarah at 10:17 p.m. Sarah, I'm scared. Rashed is here. In my room. Fahad left. I don't know what to do. Sarah's response. What? Call security. Lock the door. Hala. I can't. It will cause a scene. The family. Everything will be ruined. No messages after 10:23 p.m. The drafts folder revealed messages never sent. Draft to Fahad, 10:47 p.m. He says you'll divorce me, that your family will destroy me. Fahad, please come back. I can't do this alone. Draft to her mother, 11:02 p.m. Mama, I'm sorry. I tried to build a good life. But the past won't let me go. Draft to Rashed, 11:18 p.m. You win. Are you happy? You've destroyed me, just like you wanted. The browser history was devastating. 10:35 p.m. How to get emergency divorce in Dubai, 10:41 p.m. Can marriage be annulled on wedding night, 10:53 p.m. Syrian women divorced by wealthy families, 11:04 p.m. Refugee status if marriage fails you. Then the searches changed. 11:12 p.m. Quickest way to end suffering, 11:14 p.m. Painless death methods, 11:16 p.m. Will family be shamed by suicide? Final search at 11:17 p.m. Forgive me. Lieutenant Al-Mansour read everything twice. This wasn't simple suicide. This was a woman systematically convinced she had no way out. And someone had spent time with her during the transformation from hope to despair. At 6 a.m., he requested the mansion's CCTV footage. 24 cameras covered the property. The family's security resisted, but Al-Mansour had legal authority. The review began at 8 a.m. Lieutenant Al-Mansour, Captain Yusuf Al-Sharif, and forensic psychologist Dr. Rashed Abdullah started with camera 24, the hallway outside the bridal suite. 9:47 p.m. Fahad exited. His body language showed distress but control. He walked toward the east wing at normal pace. 9:52 p.m. Rashed emerged from his room. His body language was different. Dr. Abdullah paused the footage. This isn't concern. This is anticipation. 9:53 p.m. Rashed knocked on the bridal suite door. Hala opened it, showing surprise and alarm. She tried closing it. Rashed blocked with his foot, entered, pulled the door closed. Forced entry, Captain Al-Sharif noted. They watched the empty hallway. No one approached. No one left. 10:17 p.m. Audio enhancement picked up muffled sounds. Two voices. One elevated, male, aggressive. One quieter, female, pleading. 10:30 p.m. No exit. Rashed claimed he'd left at 10:30, but the door remained closed. 11:34 p.m. Rashed finally emerged. 1 hour and 41 minutes after entering, not 30 minutes. His clothes were slightly disheveled, then readjusted. He walked calmly to his room, showed no urgency. Nearly 2 hours alone with her, Dr. Abdullah said. Enough to systematically destroy someone's psychological state. 11:47 p.m. Fahad returned. He knocked, tried the handle, knocked harder. Got the estate manager with a key. 11:54 p.m. Fahad's scream. Captured on audio. Pure anguish. Lieutenant Al-Mansour sat back. Rashed lied about his timeline. He was with Hala for nearly 2 hours. During that time, she went from researching divorce to researching suicide. He was the last person to see her alive, and he lied to investigators. Can we prove he caused her death? Captain Al-Sharif asked. That was the question. Physical evidence showed suicide. CCTV showed opportunity and deception. Phone records showed psychological deterioration. But could they prove Rashed had psychologically coerced her? Dr. Abdullah reviewed the timeline. Look at her phone activity. She stopped searching for escape around 11:10 p.m., 40 minutes into his visit. That's when her searches changed to death. Something he said broke her completely. Lieutenant Al-Mansour made his decision. At 10 a.m., he called Abdul Rahman and requested a family meeting. He'd present the CCTV evidence, the phone records, the timeline proving Rashed had lied. He couldn't arrest Rashed for murder. Physical evidence didn't support it. But he could charge him with false statements, obstruction, being present during death and failing to prevent it. More importantly, he'd ensure everyone knew the truth. The footage would become public record. Rashed wouldn't face murder charges, but the truth would follow him forever. The meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. Lieutenant Al-Mansour prepared carefully, knowing he'd face the most expensive lawyers in Dubai. He thought about Hala, 26 years old, brilliant, refugee who'd survived war only to be destroyed by ego on her wedding night. She deserved justice, even if the system couldn't provide it traditionally. Sometimes truth was the only justice possible. February 15, 2018. 4 p.m. The Al-Mansour estate. Truth versus power. Abdul Rahman's office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, original artwork worth millions, furniture suggesting generations of accumulated power. Abdul Rahman sat behind his massive desk. Sheikha Noura beside him, expression cold. Four attorneys flanked them. Fahad sat apart, still wearing yesterday's clothes, eyes hollow. Rashed sat composed, freshly dressed, showing appropriate concern but no genuine distress. Lieutenant Al-Mansour connected his laptop to the screen. There are significant inconsistencies requiring revision of preliminary findings. An attorney leaned forward. Unless you have evidence of a crime, Lieutenant, the finding was suicide. Tragic, but not criminal. Mr. Rashed, you stated you left the bridal suite at 10:30 p.m. Correct. Rashed nodded. That's my recollection. The CCTV shows differently. Al-Mansour played the footage, Rashed entering at 9:53, the timestamp counting, Rashed emerging at 11:34. 1 hour and 41 minutes. Not 30. Over an hour discrepancy. Explain. Rashed's composure cracked slightly. I lost track of time. We were talking. You lost track of an hour? With your brother's bride. Their wedding night. In their private suite. The attorney intervened. Memory under stress is unreliable. It's not just timeline. Al-Mansour displayed Hala's texts. At 10:17 p.m., she told her sister she was scared. that Mr. Rashed was in her room. Her sister said call security. Mrs. Al-Mansour said she couldn't because it would cause a scene. He showed the messages on screen. I'm scared. Rashed is here. Fahad made a broken sound, covering his face. Between 10:30 and 11:10 p.m., she researched divorce, annulment, refugee status if marriage failed. Desperately searching for escape while Mr. Rashed was with her. The browser history appeared on screen, each search a step toward despair. At 11:12 p.m., her searches changed. No more escape options. Now quickest way to end suffering and painless death methods. Something during Mr. Rashed's visit transformed her from seeking escape to seeking death. He was the only person present during that transformation. Abdul Rahman's voice was steel. You're implying my son is responsible without evidence of physical harm, without witnesses, without proof. What exactly are you accusing him of? Psychological manipulation resulting in death. Lying to investigators. And this family attempting to bury truth. Attorneys erupted, but Al-Mazrouei continued through the chaos. Her final text draft, 11:18 p.m., 7 minutes before death, addressed to Rashed. You win. Are you happy? You've destroyed me, just like you wanted. The words appeared on screen, condemnation from beyond death. What did you say during those 101 minutes that made a brilliant woman believe death was her only option? Rashed's composure shattered. She betrayed me. She left me and went to my brother without telling him. She lied to everyone. She deserved to know consequences. Rashed, be quiet, Abdul Rahman commanded. Too late. The admission hung, recorded on Al-Mazrouei's phone running audio the entire meeting. So you did have a prior relationship. You lied about that too. Attorneys conferred frantically, but Al-Mazrouei wasn't finished. Here's what happened. Rashed had a relationship with Hala last year. It ended badly. When he discovered she was engaged to his brother, he saw a revenge opportunity. He returned specifically to destroy her. He spent the reception planting doubts with Fahad, ensuring they'd argue and she'd be alone. Then he entered her room uninvited and spent 2 hours psychologically torturing her, reminding her of their past, threatening exposure, convincing her life was over. She'd be divorced and disgraced, her family destroyed. Al-Mazrouei's voice carried absolute certainty. He didn't physically force her, didn't tie the noose, but he created psychological conditions making her believe death was her only escape. Then left her alone knowing what would happen. That's not suicide. That's murder by psychological manipulation. Fahad stood, facing his brother. You killed her. You knew her. You dated her. And you killed her because she chose me. Rashed met his gaze. She chose wrong. She needed to understand that. The statement was damning, not legally sufficient but morally conclusive. Legal negotiations took 3 days. Al-Mazrouei pushed for manslaughter. The attorneys argued without physical threats, audio recordings, or witnesses. Charges couldn't be sustained. The compromise was insufficient. Rashed banned from UAE for 10 years. Criminal charges for false statements suspended if he remained abroad. CCTV footage, phone records, investigation findings would become public record. The family would provide $5 million to Hala's family. No PR spin about unstable bride. They'd remain silent, letting evidence speak. It wasn't justice, but it was what the system could provide. Hala was buried February 17th in Dubai's Syrian cemetery. Hundreds attended, her community, colleagues, clients, and Fahad, who stood apart from his family and wept openly. Rashed didn't attend. He'd returned to London, reputation destroyed but free. Fahad moved to Dubai Marina the week after. Resigned from family businesses, severed contact with parents, established a foundation in Hala's name supporting Syrian refugee women. Scholarships, legal assistance, psychological counseling. His only public statement 3 weeks later. Hala was my wife for 7 hours. I spent 6 believing lies instead of protecting her. I failed her. My family failed her. Our obsession with image, our willingness to protect my brother despite his nature. These failures killed her. I cannot bring Hala back. Cannot undo leaving her alone when she needed me. But I can ensure her story is known, her truth told, that women like her have resources she didn't have. Hala, wherever you are, I'm sorry. You deserved better than all of us. The Al-Mansours disowned Fahad. Abdul Rahman removed him from his will. Sheikha Noura stated Fahad had betrayed family loyalty. But Fahad didn't care about inheritance anymore. Hala's family used settlement money for scholarship funds at AUD, 5 Syrian refugee students yearly studying design and architecture in her name. Rania became an advocate for Arab women in abusive relationships, speaking about psychological abuse and pressures in communities where family honor superseded individual safety. The case changed UAE law. 2019 legislation addressed psychological coercion and emotional abuse, creating pathways to prosecute manipulation leading to suicide. Legal scholars informally called it Hala's Law. Lieutenant Al-Mazrui kept Hala's photograph on his desk. Her professional headshot, warm smile and intelligent eyes. It reminded him why truth mattered even when justice was incomplete. Rashed lived in London on his trust fund, attempting image rehabilitation through philanthropy. His relationships never lasted. In leaked recordings by an ex-girlfriend, Hala made her choices. What happened was tragic, but not my responsibility. The recordings went viral. Job opportunities vanished. Social circles closed. Even wealth couldn't erase what he'd done. 10 years later, 2028, Rashed's ban expired. He attempted returning for his father's funeral. Fahad had his flight met with a civil restraining order. Rashed attended via video link from London, watching as his younger brother stood in the position that should have been his. On February 14th every year, Fahad visited Hala's grave with white roses. Sometimes reading poetry, sometimes discussing the women her foundation had helped, sometimes sitting in silence carrying guilt. Time never diminished. The case remained controversial. Reminder that wealth couldn't purchase innocence, truth eventually surfaced, and psychological violence could kill even if law struggled to recognize it. Hala's story became cautionary tale. In refugee communities, she was remembered as brilliant woman who almost escaped. In legal circles, the case that changed legislation. In psychology, perfect example of coercive control culminating in tragedy. But to those who knew her, Hala was simply a woman who deserved to live, who deserved the life she'd worked for, who deserved protection from men who saw women as possessions. The CCTV footage remained in archives, accessible to researchers. Camera 24's recording told the story words couldn't. Woman trapped between two brothers, between past and future, ultimately choosing death over impossible circumstances. Her final search, "Forgive me," remained on her phone, plea to everyone she thought she disappointed. But anyone who knew her story understood Hala had nothing to be forgiven for. She didn't need forgiveness. She deserved justice. The truth remained, preserved in footage, records, and memories of everyone who knew what really happened February 14, 2018. The truth was that Hala Al-Shami deserved to live.